The sun at Fort Granite hung high and merciless, pressing heat into every inch of the desert range. It was the kind of afternoon when metal burned skin and the air shimmered like water. Along the firing line, soldiers from every branch waited in formation. The dust clinging to their boots and lips, a faint breeze pushed grit across the benches, carrying the smell of oil and brass. Then, among the rows of dull black rifles, a flash of color broke the monotony. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes, quiet and deliberate, unzipped her Pelican case and drew out a matte red Accuracy International AXSR. The color turned heads before the shape did. A low ripple of laughter passed down the line. Someone muttered about Instagram. Another called it a parade piece. From the shade canopy, Colonel Matthew Rourke tilted his head, his voice dry as sand. Painting rifles for the 4th of July now. Sergeant, the laughter grew louder. Lauren didn't respond. She set the rifle on the mat, checked torque with practiced hands, 65 inch-pounds even, then leveled her Night Force ATACR optic until the bubble held dead center. Her movements were mechanical, efficient, unaffected by the noise. The others shifted, waiting for her to flinch. She didn't. She only wrote in her small green notebook. Full value. Wind 8 to 12 knots from 3 o'clock. Gusting uneven. The line quieted a little. Dust swirled. Flags twitched. And under the crushing sun, the red rifle glowed like a quiet challenge. No one yet understood. Lauren Hayes grew up in western Kentucky, where the air always carried a trace of machine oil and hay. Her father ran a small workshop behind their house, a place filled with the sound of steel being shaped and measured to perfection. She spent most of her childhood there, perched on a stool, watching sparks fall in slow motion from the lathe. Her father's hands were rough, his voice calm, his patience endless. He never yelled when she made mistakes. He just guided her small fingers along the smooth handle of a milling vise and told her what he told her every time. Metal remembers mistakes. The words stayed in her longer than the smell of cutting oil. He taught her that precision wasn't about control. It was about respect. Respect for the tools, the material, and the time it takes to do something right. In that small shop, Lauren learned to measure twice, to breathe before cutting, and to never rush what mattered. The rhythm of the machines taught her the kind of patience no book could. Every sound meant something. Every touch left a mark. When she joined the Army years later, that same discipline guided her. She enlisted as a unit supply specialist. Mos 92 Yankee. The work was quiet, methodical, full of accountability and checklists. Most soldiers saw it as a paper job. She saw geometry in every inventory and symmetry in every serial number. Numbers calm here. During a temporary duty rotation, she was assigned to support the Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning. She was supposed to handle equipment records and ammunition tracking, but the ranges drew her in. She stayed late after hours, watching shooters read mirage and call wind. She started keeping her own notes, not for rank or recognition, just for curiosity. She filled a small green notebook with hand-drawn ballistic tables, barometric pressure readings, and field calculations. Page after page of data written in tiny careful print. Over time, she noticed patterns. Wind shifts followed rhythm. Mirage behaved like language. She began predicting drift corrections before the shooters called them. It was never about proving herself, only understanding the craft. Years later, her notes were quietly copied and laminated into field cards, the same dope sheets other soldiers used without knowing their origin. The handwriting was hers, though no one asked. She didn't mind. The work had already remembered her, the way steel remembers the hand that shapes it. The first full day on the range began under a white sky that seemed to hum with heat. Fort Granite stretched out flat and endless, its sand-colored ridges melting into the horizon. Trucks idled near the shooting line. The smell of hot diesel mixing with dust and sunburned canvas Soldiers from across the branches stood shoulder to shoulder. Rangers. Marines. A few coalition shooters from overseas. The air buzzed with competition and quiet pride. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes moved through it like she belonged to a different rhythm. No rush. No swagger. Just deliberate motion. She laid her mat down in lane 9, opened her Pelican case, and lifted out the Red Accuracy International AXSR she had built piece by piece over the past year. Chambered in 375 CHATAC. It wasn't a rifle for beginners. The Nightforce ATACR optic gleamed faintly in the sunlight. The kind of tool only serious shooters brought. Lauren crouched and checked the torque settings with her small wrench. 65 inch-pounds on every screw. Not one out of line. Her bubble level sat perfectly centered as she adjusted the bipod. Next came the data card. Laminated and clean. Its columns filled with elevation, wind drift, and density altitude. She placed it beside her mat like a quiet ritual. Behind her, a group of rangers traded jokes. One of them, a tall sergeant with mirrored sunglasses, called out, asked if she had ever made it through sniper school. Lauren didn't look up. She said she'd attended a scout sniper adjunct during SFQC evaluation. The laughter came quick, sharp. A logistics NCO talking like a shooter. She didn't answer back. She didn't have to. A few benches down, a young Marine fumbled with his bipod. The spring wouldn't lock, and his hands shook with frustration. Lauren moved beside him without saying much. She knelt, loosened the tension, then guided his fingers to reset the Harris SLM legs. Try it now. It clicked into place. He smiled, embarrassed, and whispered, "Thanks." She nodded once and went back to her station, her face unreadable. By afternoon, the wind flags at the far berm flicked back and forth, stubborn and restless. Lauren studied them through her scope, marking 8 to 12 knots, full value from 3 o'clock. Around here, the noise continued, full of chatter and laughter. She stayed still, calm in the storm of voices, her red rifle catching sunlight like it already knew the outcome. By early afternoon, the heat at Fort Granite had turned the air into liquid glass. Mirage shimmered across the valley, bending light and distance until the target seemed to float. The earth itself looked like it was breathing. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes sat low behind her spotting scope, elbows braced, her cheek barely touching the eyepiece. Through the Bushnell Elite tactical glass, she watched the world move in ways most people never noticed. The grass at 800 meters leaned one way, while the dust devils at 1200 turned the opposite. Every swirl, every shimmer told a story. She wrote in her notebook with steady strokes, full value gusts from 3 o'clock, 8 to 12 knots, shifting every 7 seconds. A private next to her leaned over, curious but nervous. He asked what she was watching for. She didn't look away from the scope. The wind is a moving conversation. You listen more than you speak. The words came quiet, but they carried. The private blinked, unsure what to say, then went back to his rifle. Her tone wasn't mystical. It was matter of fact, like someone explaining gravity. Around them, rifles cracked and dust bloomed wide of the plates. Shooters misread the mirage, chased the wind, cursed under their breath. Lauren kept writing, pencil moving in rhythm with the shifts. The laughter that had filled the morning began to fade. The crowd's mood changed. Small at first, like a campfire burning low. Even those who'd mocked her red rifle now watched in silence as she worked, unbothered. Precise. Colonel Matthew Rourke made his rounds along the line, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting the heat. When he reached her lane, he tapped her name with his pen. "You'll go last. Sergeant, don't want to slow the line." His tone carried the kind of casual authority that pretends to be kind. She only nodded. writing 2 words in her logbook. Mid-afternoon window. No reaction. No defense. She understood timing better than anyone there. Behind the firing line, Master Chief Daniel Harland stood with his arms crossed. Watching her, years of sniper instruction had trained him to spot patterns, and he saw one now. Her breathing was even, her turret checks precise, her pauses deliberate. She wasn't rehearsing, she was aligning. He recognized the rhythm in her movements, the cadence of someone who'd lived behind a rifle for longer than her records suggested. He leaned toward an instructor beside him and asked quietly who trained her. The instructor shrugged. No one knew. Harlan didn't answer. He just kept watching as the wind picked up again, scattering the dust, bending the flags, whispering secrets that only one person on that range seemed to understand. The range had quieted into the kind of silence that comes only after too many missed shots. The laughter from earlier had thinned to murmurs and dry curses. During a short break, Staff Sergeant Loren Hayes noticed a young private still prone on his mat, his cheek pressed awkwardly against the stock. Every shot pulled high and wide, and frustration had crept into his breathing. She crouched beside him without a word, watching him squeeze the trigger again. The rifle kicked. The shot drifted. She waited a moment, then spoke softly. Don't chase the wobble. Fix your face. The private blinked, half smiling like he'd misheard. She pointed to the notch in the stock. The rifle listens when your cheek rests in the same place every time. It needs to hear you breathe steady. He nodded, trying again. She placed 2 fingers lightly along his jaw, guiding him into position, then stepped back. The next 3 rounds hit tight, clustered like they'd been waiting all morning for permission. He lifted his head, grinning, proud and almost shy. She only gave a small nod, wiped her hand on her sleeve, and walked away. Farther down the line, a British corporal was shaking his head at a string of misses. His spotter called corrections, but the rounds kept drifting left. His dope card said 1.8 mils right, and the numbers weren't lying. Lauren stopped beside him. Split your hold, she said calmly. Half on the boil break. Float to full by count 5. He hesitated, then did as she said. The next shot rang steel with a crisp, distant clang. His eyes went wide. The spotter laughed under his breath. Across the firing line, heads began to turn. The men who had spent the morning mocking her now found themselves watching instead, not speaking, not joking, just watching. Her tone, her timing, the rhythm of her corrections, all carried the weight of experience. Master Chief Daniel Harland saw it too. He listened to her phrasing, the sequence of her calls. It wasn't luck. It wasn't guesswork. It was doctrine. The same language used by the Army marksmanship unit, spoken in the quiet confidence of someone who had written parts of it herself. No one said anything out loud. But the air had changed. Respect had entered the room without asking permission. The afternoon light had turned sharp, cutting across the range in long gold lines. The air shimmered above the barrels, the smell of gunpowder and brass settling into everything. Staff Sergeant Loren Hayes knelt by her mat, tightening her sling and adjusting the rear bag. The sun caught her wrist as she moved, and something black flickered beneath the dust. A small tattoo, a dragonfly, its wings fine and deliberate, etched with a set of coordinates. Master Chief Daniel Harland saw it and stopped cold. He'd seen those numbers before, years ago, in a briefing that wasn't meant to be remembered. The ridge east of Asadabad, Kunar Province, 2013. A place that had turned into a story whispered across teams. He remembered sitting in a tent, the briefing officer explaining how a female sniper had read the wind off a canyon wall and guided a SEAL team out of an ambush. No name, no face. Just the phrase they'd written on the whiteboard. Wind talks. I listen. Harlan moved closer, quiet enough that only the crunch of gravel gave him away. He asked if she had served in that region. Lauren didn't look up. She wrote in her green notebook the same words from the legend. Wind talks. I listen. The pencil scratched once, then stopped. The air seemed to tighten, as if even the wind paused to hear what would come next. Colonel Matthew Rourke caught the exchange and laughed. Too loud. Too forced. Some field story, he said. Probably another myth from the sandbox. Harlan didn't look at him. He faced the shooters instead. His voice low. Measured. This is Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes, FOMA instructor, Army Marksmanship Unit. Some of you are using her wind tables right now. The laughter died instantly. Heads turned. The sound of brass under boots went still. The private she had helped earlier stared at her with wide eyes. The British corporal lowered his rifle. They knew the cards clipped to their stocks. The laminated data sheets they trusted in every firing position. She had written them. Rourke's smirk faltered. He cleared his throat. Tone softer now. Carry on. Sergeant. Lauren nodded once. Calm as ever. No victory in her face. Only acceptance. Around here, silence settled heavy and unbroken. The kind that didn't demand applause, the kind that came only when truth landed, and everyone in earshot understood they had just seen something they weren't supposed to overlook again. The desert heat pressed down like a hand, flattening sound and space until the air itself seemed to hum. The steel target, barely visible against the far ridge, shimmered in the mirage like a ghost. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes lay prone behind her rifle, her elbows dug into the mat, body aligned in a perfect line of bone and barrel. Every movement she made was measured. She checked the torque on her rifle screws. 65 inch-pounds exact. She centered her bubble level, adjusted her sling, then dialed the elevation knob to 12.3 mils. Had dope card? Laminated and taped to the stock. Caught the light. Density altitude matched her calculation. Coriolis correction applied. Spin drift accounted for. Time of flight, 7.3 seconds. She took her first sighting shot. The recoil pushed straight back into her shoulder. Clean and controlled. Through the scope, she watched the vapor trail curve low and left. The impact short, she wrote in her notebook. The words precise and small. Boil seam pulls downright. Correction plus 0.1 elevation. Plus 0.2 mil left. She chambered another round. The bolt gliding smooth. The second shot drifted a foot right. She saw it before the spotter called it. The wind was lying. A canyon vent between 2,600 and 3,000 meters was bending air the wrong way, creating a false tailwind. She marked another line. Vent right push. Ignore apparent tail. Colonel Rourke's voice came from behind her. Sharp. Rehearsed authority. Two-siders only. Sergeant. Then you're done. Lauren didn't turn. 2 will do, she said softly. Her tone was steady, almost gentle, like she was talking to the wind itself. She settled again, her cheek pressed into the stock, the rifle. An extension of her breath, she exhaled once, long and even, fingers loosened, then tightened on the trigger. The wind flag's downrange flicked back and forth in argument, then stilled, aligned just enough. She counted in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Break. The rifle cracked. Recoil smooth and centered. Through the scope, the vapor trail arced across 3,800 meters of heat. The world held its breath. 7.3 seconds later, the sound came back. A single metallic ring, faint but unmistakable. Still hit. No one spoke. The spotters froze. A Marine lowered his binoculars. A Ranger removed his ear protection. Face pale. Even the dust seemed to pause midair. Then Harlan stood. Slow. Deliberate. He nodded once. Silent recognition. Rourke hesitated. His earlier sarcasm burned away by what he had just witnessed. He walked up beside her. His voice keyter now. I was wrong. Sergeant. Lauren kept her eyes on the target. Her tone calm. Almost kind. Wynne doesn't care who's in charge. Seer. Rourke's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. No. It doesn't. The range remained still. Flags that had fought each other all day now pointed the same direction. Unified for once. The air carried only the faint echo of that single, perfect shot, stretching across the desert like a breath that never quite ended. The echo of the shot faded into the heat, leaving only the sound of the wind and the slow ticking of metal cooling in the sun. The steel plate far across the valley still shimmered, its silver mark glinting faintly through the mirage. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes stayed prone for a few moments longer, breathing steady, eyes calm behind the scope. Then she sat up, opened her green notebook, and began writing in small, precise letters. 3,800 meters. Vent seam confirmed. Consistent with 2 shear model. She underlined it once. Closed the book halfway. Then looked toward the distant ridge, as if memorizing the air itself. The range stayed silent. No one clapped. No one spoke. Even the younger soldiers who had been restless all morning stood motionless, as if afraid to disturb whatever they had just witnessed. A private finally gathered the courage to approach her. He hesitated before asking why she had helped one of the shooters earlier, the same one who had laughed at her rifle. She glanced at him, expression steady. One clean hit teaches faster than 100 speeches. The private nodded slowly, unsure how to reply, then just smiled and walked off. Colonel Rourke came next. His hat was off, his posture different. He asked her to lead an afternoon block on wind segmentation. She nodded once and said Mirage is a better teacher than I am. But when the class formed up, she stood at the front anyway. Chalk in Hunt. She drew 3 lines on the whiteboard and labeled them Shooter's Wind, Mid-Range Shear, Target Vent. Wind doesn't stay loyal, she said. It changes friends every kilometer. The class listened. Quiet. Pens scratching on paper. She finished by saying Mirage is your first language. Everything else is an accent. Then she closed her notebook and walked off the line. The same calm and measured as when the day began. No celebration, just silence and respect following her into the heat. The sun had dropped low enough to soften the color of everything it touched. The heat that had ruled the day began to ease, leaving the air warm and still. Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes packed her rifle with the same deliberate care she had shown that morning. Each tool, each cartridge, each strap returned to its place. The red rifle slid back into its case, the lid closing with a quiet click. Around here, soldiers moved slowly, voices low, as if the noise of routine felt out of place after what they had seen. Colonel Rourke approached, hat in hand, his boots crunching over the gravel. He stopped beside her, eyes fixed on the open range. He said he used to think respect came with rank. Lauren didn't look up from her case. Rank fades faster than wind, she said. Competence stays. The words hung there, steady and unforced. Carried away by the first cool breath of evening, a few yards back, Master Chief Harlan stood watching. The fading light caught the edge of her sleeve again. And for a moment, the dragonfly tattoo reappeared. He understood it now. The coordinates weren't a mark of glory, but a memory of survival, a reminder of the quiet lessons learned when everything else had gone wrong. She pulled her sleeve down, closed her case, and lifted it with both hands. Then she walked toward the trucks without ceremony, her boots leaving small impressions in the dust. Behind her, the range settled into silence. The steel plate on the far ridge still shimmered faintly, a single silver mark catching the last of the sun. Some victory don't echo. They linger. The wind turned soft again, whispering across the valley. and the world seemed to pause long enough to remember that real strength doesn't shout. It listens. It endures. It proves itself without ever saying a word,